Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Art of Collecting. I am so pleased that you're all able to join us today for what I know is going to be a very informative and entertaining look behind the curtain, which will bring us inside the mind of an art collector, or three. So before I get started, I first wanted to mention that we are recording this event and it will be available at a later time. And I wanted to start out by saying that this panel discussion is presented by the Fitchburg Art Museum in collaboration with ArtsWorcester. And we have gathered this panel of collectors together in celebration of two exhibitions currently on view at FAM. Both shows feature works from the private collections of Massachusetts-based collectors. The first is Uncovering the Human Condition, the Arthur S. Goldberg collection, with works that feature the human figure as a means to understand the human condition. We also have Joyride, Cars in American Art from the Terry and Eva Herndon collection, which explores how the car has impacted our lived experience, collective and personal histories, and ideas about American identity. And we have a couple of shots for you to see. Both of these exhibitions are on view until January 9th at the Fitchburg Art Museum, so we hope to see you there. I would also like to take a brief moment to thank everyone who has worked behind the scenes to make this program possible. In addition to our panelists, I'd like to thank Juliet Feibel, who is here behind the scenes, from FAM, Marjorie Rawl and Maxwell Zaleski, from ArtsWorcester, Alice Dillon, Allie Heimos, and Juliet Feibel, the Executive Director of ArtsWorcester. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to invite Juliet to introduce all of the wonderful things that they do at ArtsWorcester, for those of you who may not be familiar. Juliet, welcome.
Thank you, our friends at FAM. We're really thrilled to be dipping our toes in this water. For those of you that are not familiar with ArtsWorcester, we are a contemporary art nonprofit center. We work with regional artists and everyone who loves contemporary art. We exhibit over 300 member artists every year in solo, juried, and large group exhibitions. You can find us here in the historic Printers Building downtown, and our exhibitions and educational programs and openings are always open and free to all. We have a much beloved partnership of 1 decade now with the Fitchburg Art Museum. It centers on a collaborative set of exhibitions that we call All Together, Call and Response, although every year the actual exhibition has its own name. So coming up this March will be Material Matters, and I urge you all to check it out. And obviously we partner on other endeavors, so here we are today. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you, Juliet. I would now like to introduce our panelists, and we can stop the screen share. First, I'd like to introduce and welcome Jennifer Irvine, who is Director of Marketing and Business Development at Bowditch & Dewey Law Firm. She serves on the Board of Directors for ArtsWorcester and on the Board of Directors for the Worcester Center for Crafts, which is a community of creatives and makers dedicated to the promotion, appreciation, and teaching of craft. She's a former Museum Council Fellow at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, and a friend once told her that she lives among her art rather than in her home. Welcome, Jennifer. Next, we have Arthur Goldberg, who is a businessman and musician and composer. Arthur began collecting art in his early 20s and never studied art or art history, but grew his collecting knowledge by visiting galleries and artist studios and listening to lectures. His tastes have changed over the years from realism, photorealism, surrealism, and more recently, I think, has expanded into the realm of fantasy and memories and the shifting idea of reality. Welcome, Arthur. And finally, we have Terry and Eva Herndon, who met as students at Antioch College in Ohio. During study breaks, they often visited art museums and attended performances together. After college, Terry worked for the Lincoln Labs in Carlisle, Massachusetts, and restored cars in his free time. In the 1980s, Terry and Eva saw a painting that inspired them to think about how cars had shaped society and the landscape. So they decided to stop buying cars and start collecting art instead about the car's impact on life in the United States. So just a general word about the format of this panel. I'm going to start with some general questions for our panelists. And at the end of this conversation, we're going to leave some time for questions from our audience members. And so for our audience members, feel free to write in any time with questions in the chat. Allie is going to be monitoring that. You can also raise your hand and we will call on you. And Allie, please feel free to jump in or join the conversation at any point that you see fit. All right, let's get into the questions. This is what everybody has been waiting for. So I always like to say, let's start at the very beginning. So my first question for everyone is, what made you interested in collecting art? Really, how did this all begin? And I'd like to start with Jennifer.
Hi everybody. So I was thinking about this question, and I think there were a few points in my life that kind of excelled the art collecting. First of all, my mother was an art history major, so I could track it all the way back to her for sure. She took me to museums and galleries and gave me an appreciation of art. I was very interested in art as a teenager and even won a few awards for it. In my mid-20s, I joined the museum council at the MFA, and that really was a catalyst because then I was surrounded by people who had the same interest. And we could talk about it. We could share artists, we could meet artists together, we could talk about it. And then once I bought a home and had more wall space, then it really took off. So there were a couple of points where that happened for me.
Great. Eva and Terry, I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you got into art. I kind of gave a brief introduction, but what was your starting point? What made you interested in art?
Well, we both came from families that collected art. I had a great uncle who was part of the Stieglitz crowd, and when he came over to this country in 1905, he collected wonderful pictures and lived in New York. And we used to take my sister and myself to the Metropolitan Museum a lot because he had an apartment a block away from the museum. And sadly, he left all his good works to the museum, Metropolitan, but they're all in the basement because museums have they show about 0.1% of the works they have. And Terry's family out in Kansas, his mother was they're always very interested in art. She was quite a collector. She collected pressed glassware, antique furniture, and whenever they had extras, they would collect something, right, Terry?
Yeah.
So that's about it. So it's from both sides, and we just liked art. We just decided to start collecting. It was never anything. Wasn't a point. This is what we decided to do. It just sort of happened.
Interesting. No grand moment. And Arthur, how about you? Where did you get started?
I got started with my mother, who was an avid collector of Art Deco. And at one point, a friend, now deceased, had a major collection of two-dimensional art and three-dimensional art. And I asked him, what would I do if I wanted to change directions from Art Deco to contemporary art? And he advised me at that time to meet a friend of his, a person who at that time was involved with Boston University, John Arthur. I'm not sure where John is today, and John introduced me to contemporary artists that he had worked with or had. He was writing a biography of a very famous artist at that time. And so I switched directions and then went into avidly collecting contemporary art. That's a long time ago, by the way. I'm talking over 40 years ago.
Very experienced art collector.
Pardon me?
What I love about all three of your stories is that it all started with your families, that you sort of had this legacy of at least an interest or a love of art kind of passed down. I think that's really interesting and not necessarily always the case. Do you all remember the first artwork that you purchased? Jennifer?
Yes, I do. So in my early 20s, I really didn't have much of a collection. I had like a few things here and there, but I went to my first jazz fest in New Orleans, and James Michaelopoulos is a pretty well-known New Orleans artist, and he was doing the posters for several years. He's in many, many, many posters. And I bought one framed and had to ship it back. And I absolutely loved it. I still love it. And it was a reach for me at the time, but it really, you know, I've taken that with me in every place I've ever lived. I have always had it up in my living room. For me, art is often a memory, and I purchase a lot of art when I travel. So that was my very first one.
That's great. Eva and Terry, I think both you and Arthur are a little bit further removed from your first purchase. So do you have any memories of the first or a first purchase?
Well, it's sort of hard to remember what exactly we purchased first. I think it was just a silk screen, which happened to be by one of the people we later got to know. We purchased it from the Cambridge Art Gallery in Boston, where they were selling it was just a little silk screen. We just started with that, and then we didn't really purchase car pictures for a while until we ran out of space for cars, and then we started working.
It was a logistical move. Arthur, how about you?
As I mentioned before, my first introduction into contemporary art was with this guy named John Arthur, who at that time was at Boston University. He also happened to be the biographer of Richard Estes, and he was peddling Estes prints. And so at that time, I bought 3 Estes prints, which I subsequently donated somewhere, which I can't remember, and also introduced me to other artists in the local area. One that comes to mind right now is the artist George Nick, and I have a George Nick. I have a George Nick. Well, that was the first one. I've had several, and other artists that I was introduced to in person: Stephen Trefanides, many others. But my first real purchase was the Estes prints.
That's wonderful. Okay, so to sort of move forward with that thought. So at the beginning of this, I alluded to some sort of specialization of theme, because at the Fitchburg Art Museum, our 2 collection shows are focused thematically. And so my question is, what makes your collection special? So Arthur and Eva and Terry, will get back to you, but I want to start with Jennifer to see if you are recognizing some sort of theme or pattern to your collecting.
Right. Well, I can hardly believe it, but I've been collecting art for nearly 20 years now. It's wild to say. But I often say there's no theme, because I just buy what I like and make sense of it later. But a lot of it is purchased while I travel. So it's sort of the story of my life in a lot of ways. And so, you know, some of it was purchased in Scotland, where I got married, you know, Greece, you know, Nepal, a lot of things from New Orleans. But certainly travel and music are big themes. I have a painting by Bob Dylan, and the image that was used for this invitation is a photograph called Lady Money Sings the Blues. And she has wonderful energy and a good story behind her. And also I have my own personal story with the art and the artist, and I've become friends with the artist. So, you know, a theme did develop, and now I'm feeling like I can continue with that theme. And it wasn't really on purpose, it just happened. And I'm excited by it, actually, at this point. And art finds its way to me as well. So sometimes people give me art. So the piece behind me, you can only see the corner of it. That was given to me by some Swedish friends who were living in Boston at the time and went to see their friend have an exhibit in New York. And then this piece is huge. This is only the corner of it. They actually brought it back on the train because they thought I would like it. And they were right, and ended up buying it from them. And it ends up being a great personal story and a great memory. And you can't really see it, but this piece also has like an eye right in the center, which I should probably show it to you, but it makes some people very uncomfortable. And so I had it hanging in my office for quite some time. And it brought me a lot of joy. So I think, you know, again, it was sort of the travel and the music and the way that art has found me. It's developing that way.
So do you see yourself now more actively seeking those themes, more sort of music related, or now that you've sort of recognized that, do you find yourself looking? Yeah,
I have. I mean, I also have a photograph of an oxidized saxophone that was found in a warehouse after Hurricane Katrina. And it's very detailed and very, very cool photograph. And that photograph and the other one I just described are the only two photographs in the whole collection that I have. And, you know, I'm thinking about many different mediums now. So I was really only going after, you know, paintings or pop art or silk screens or, you know, and now I'm more interested in sculpture. Like, you know, for example, I love the piece, I hope they talk about it, but Eva and Terry's piece of, I guess it's sort of like a goddess coming out and destroying the cars and the highways and things like that. That is one of the coolest pieces I've ever seen. And I think, yeah, I'm definitely seeking out these things a lot more, for sure. And some pieces will only resonate with me because it's my memory. But, you know, I could, you know, if somebody were to walk around my house with me, I could tell you every story. And it's happened.
Right, that's great. Okay, Eva and Terry, tell me about cars. How did cars become your focus of collecting?
Well, Terry was a real car nut. As he grew up, when he was a young boy, he was always getting into trouble in the house. He would put knives into electrical sockets and, you know, things like that, just sort of. So his mother went out to the junkyard and she said to him, she said, Terry, now I'm getting you this old Hupmobile, I'm giving you a screwdriver and a hammer, and you take that apart and leave my house alone. So that was his beginning of learning about cars, which has stood him very, very well. It's made him into an engineer. And then he just loved the way cars were made. And we collected, we had a collection of cars, and we had them all around town, and then we had to put them in our garage, and then we were out of space, and then we decided, well, maybe we better collect pictures with the cars that show how America has changed over 100 years. And it really does show the painters saw, you know, they saw the things and they realized it was different. And so we have pictures from early 1900s up to the really 2000s. And so that whole century was really a century of American cars, and it showed how we have changed. And actually, the end of the car is coming. If you look at it, we're not going to be, pretty soon the car won't be so important anymore. So,
do you have other artworks that are not of cars, or do you exclusively focus on the cars? And
well, I have two wonderful German expressionists from my parents. One is a Nolde and one is a Pechstein. And we also Terry, we did our own art. Terry was quite a sculptor. He did some lovely sculptures that we have around in our own yard. So we do have other things and stuff that we have made, and I've done a lot of craft work and stuff. So you know, it's been fun. We've had a wonderful time. It's been a good life.
And at the end of the day, that's what you really want, right?
Right, we really enjoyed it, right, Terry? We really enjoyed collecting and meeting met a lot of interesting people, a lot of interesting things.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
We met a lot of interesting people through cars.
Mhm.
One story is how we met Jay Giles. I don't know if you people know about him or not.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Terry was driving home from work in his Ferrari, and Jay Giles was coming the other way in his Ferrari, and they kept turning around trying to see who each one was. And they finally stopped at the ice cream stand in town, and Terry said, well, why don't you follow me home? And he said, he didn't. He came home and he said, I met this young man, but I don't really know who he is, but he must be doing very well because he has this very expensive lighter. And so he came up and they talked cars, and our son, who was a teenager at the time, saw Jay Giles driving up, and we didn't know who he was because we were just kind of stick in the mud, you know. So he drove in and it was quite surprising. That was the beginning of a very long and happy relationship that Terry had with Jay. They worked on cars for many years, actually, till Terry got sick, and then finally Jay died. But they had a very good time together. And actually Jay's wife, Chris, came to our opening. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a great story. All right, so Arthur, what makes your collection special? At the Fitchburg Art Museum, we have an exhibition of works that are focused on the figure, but is that your main passion or interest?
Well, you asked the question, what's the theme? The theme has changed greatly, and it has never remained stagnant. I started off collecting realism and photorealism. I have not collected that genre of art for a number of years. The question that you just asked me, what makes my art collection special?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that I think makes it special is that, first, I don't have a curator. I don't have a person that tells me or advises me what to buy, what to, where to hang it, stuff, you know, and that thing. So it's all my doing. I've made many mistakes, and but one of the things that I find that makes it feels more special to me is that many of the artists that I have collected, mostly in the two-dimensional sphere, has been that I've met the artists. I've actually made it a point to go to their studios, wherever they might be, whether it's in New England, Florida, one of the Carolinas, California. I've actually gone out and met them, and I find that to be a very special part of collecting. And it has rewarded me greatly. I've learned a lot from the artists. Many of the artists are not just painters by the numbers on the canvas or similar to that. They're very deep thinking, and they have something to say. And in the world that we live in today, I think it's very important to listen to the artists that I, at least, have been in contact with.
Yeah, I completely agree with Arthur. The opportunity to know the artist and have a relationship changes your relationship with the art. And, you know, relying on them for art education, you know, other connections, you know, knowing the story behind the art makes it special. I mean, you have your own personal story, but, you know, to be able to visit them in their studio is amazing. I have called artists when I've been going to shows. For example, a great one, if you want to get started with art, is the Affordable Art Fair in New York. So I have called an artist friend, the person who did Lady Money Sings the Blues, actually. And, you know, I met him with some other friends, and he took us around the whole art fair, like pointing out up and coming artists, things that were great value. And that was a fantastic education, and my whole group was appreciative of, for his effort and time. And it was a really special day. And I think, the more that you can do that, and, places like ArtsWorcester can facilitate that relationship, and, the chance to go to a gallery opening and actually speak to the artist about why they created what they created, what did they want to say, and then talking to other people about what they're getting from the art. I mean, it just makes it social and fun.
So that's great. So I was going to ask a follow-up question about where and how do you meet artists and interact with them? And you've given a couple of examples. So Arthur or Jennifer or Eva and Terry, do you have any additional thoughts on that, on sort of how to make those contacts?
Go ahead.
Any thoughts on how to make the well, we just went around, looked in magazines, went to galleries. Just saw something, sometimes you just call people up and see a couple of pictures. He saw a picture on the computer or something with an artist, and he'd call them up and see if they were interested and have a nice talk with them. It's just sort of happens if you're there willing to have it happen, I guess, in a way. You meet them.
Arthur, do you have any additional thoughts on where and how to meet artists and talk to them?
Well, I have met artists under circumstances that I never expected to have met the artist. For example, many years ago, in the late 70s, I believe, I was in Provincetown, and I went to an auction, and one of the pieces that came up, the auctioneer, the person who was presenting the piece, was Salvador Dali.
Oh, wow.
And I said, oh, that's what I said. Oh, wow, it was right.
Yeah.
And I went up and I met Salvador Dali.
Amazing.
That was quite a thrill. And I'm looking forward, actually, now. I've been to the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, but I have not been to the new Dali Museum in St. Petersburg. I have a home in Florida, not in St. Petersburg. But when I go back to Florida in about a month, I am going to go to the new Dali Museum. And you never know. Another quickie, and that is the person who has been helping me put together a catalog for the Fitchburg Art Museum, Juliet Feibel, who's been sitting right here. I didn't discover until recently that Juliet is a very fine artist in her own right. And I have been very proud to say that I've collected probably maybe one of her largest pieces that hangs in my dining room currently. So I say, you never know until you really get in the middle of it, who you're collecting or who's with you. That's about it right now.
That's a great point. So from all of you, it sounds like just really kind of getting out there, putting yourself out there, maybe allowing yourself to sort of make those connections, and you really never know what might come up, right? Okay, so I would like to know, this is kind of a personal curious question, whether you have a favorite artwork or a favorite time period, or whether that's a completely impossible question. So Arthur, I'd like to start with you.
People have asked me that question many times, and I've answered it most of the time by saying the most recent piece of art that I have acquired or have met the artist, that's my favorite, but
yeah,
that's such a variable. Actually, I have been in the company of what I think is one of the most under-recognized but best artist that I've ever come across, and that's Jerry Bergstrom. Jerry was very involved with the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And up to this day, I look at his work and just amazed at what he has put down on paper. He's a very, very smart guy, and he's also a very, very talented guy. But I've met others too. And when we get into this section of, let's say, various memories of art, I will talk about some of the other artists that I've met, that I've come across, that have been very much important to my personal life.
That's great. So this is also a Jerry Bergstein that we see here. The first one is in the exhibition, and this one is currently hanging in Arthur's home. Eva and Terry, do you have a favorite artwork?
Oh, I really like the photograph by, was it Fred Stein? Fred Stein, he was a photographer that came over from Germany, and he took many pictures, some famous pictures of people like Einstein and such in the 30s. And this is just such a nice picture, nice photograph of a little girl in her car, being very proud of it. And it's just a very, very pleasant picture. And so that's one of our favorite pictures. And there's lots that I like.
I'm sure it changes over time.
Yeah.
Jennifer, how about you?
I agree with Arthur. It ends up being the one that you just purchased. But it was really difficult for me to send in one, so I send in three. This piece was purchased in Nepal at the at a Tonka painting school in Bhaktapur, Nepal, when I traveled there with a very good friend. And Tonka painting is a combination of yoga, meditation, and art, and it takes 20 years of doing this, 12 hours a day, 20 years, yoga, meditation, and art to become a master.
Oh,
and this painting was painted by a master, and we as visitors got to enter the vault and pick out one, whatever we wanted to purchase. And this is painted on it's hard, I guess it's a material that's made out of yak, basically. So it's painted on that. And it's amazing. And I love it. And I'll treasure it for my whole life, both because of how special it is, but also my memory of it. So that's one of my favorite pieces. And then I think you might have another slide. Yeah, so this one, so I met this artist. So I mentioned the Affordable Art Fair in New York as a good place to go get started. But another place is the school, the SMFA, and they have an art sale every year. So I purchased this a few years ago with a friend, and we got to meet the artist. And this came in several different colors. She gave me all the options. It's a silk screen, so there's color variations, with the piece. And my close friend ended up paying for half of this as a wedding gift to us, which was lovely of her. So now I have that memory attached to it as well. But this is hanging behind me, so it is quite large. And I love everything about it. It's called Hollywood Feminist Yellow. And I've kept in touch with this artist as well, and I have other various stories about it. And if you want to go to the next one. So this piece is Ruben Natal San Miguel. He's a fantastic New York City photographer. And this piece is actually in the Museum of the City of New York permanent collection, among other collections. And I don't know, I connected with this woman in a number of ways, but her story is also very special. So this woman put 2 kids through college by selling water and soda along the basketball courts in Harlem. And then at night, she's this amazing live jazz performer in Harlem. And so she's a real hustler in a good way. and a real old school New York City performer and survivor, really. And I just adore her. And this is hanging in my living room. So those are 3 of mine.
Those are wonderful. Thank you.
I'd love to jump in with a question that came in over the chat and also via Facebook.
Yes, go ahead.
So people are wondering, is anyone collecting to support specific artists? I don't know if that means a specific individual artist, or maybe artists working in specific media, or I don't know, something else similar to that.
Well, in a way, I mean, once you discover an artist and you develop a relationship with them, you often buy a second piece. So that happens a lot. So in that way, yes. But I don't have a specific, I'm not looking to support a specific artist, but maybe I will one day.
That's great. Okay, Jennifer, can I stick with you and ask if you have a favorite memory or funny story to share?
Sure. I was thinking about this, and a good story actually happened about 2 weeks ago. The same artist of Hollywood Feminist has another piece that I could not stop thinking about for years. It's called Nessie and the Pink Moon. I wish I had an image of it, but it's the Loch Ness Monster and a T-Rex right here, and image of a castle, and then various gorgeous colors of the sky and loch behind this castle. It's a very, very cool piece. And so I called her and said, I can't stop thinking about this piece. Do you still have any? And what colors do you have them in? And she said, I sure do. And so then I started sending all the options to a good friend who lives in Los Angeles, trying to get her to help me pick out, the color that I want. And then she says, oh, I want one of these too. So then I met the artist in a parking lot. She had all of the pieces in the back of her car. And then I FaceTimed my good friend very, very early in the morning, and she was in Los Angeles, so her room was dark. And we picked out our pieces together. And I got the green one, she got the yellow one. And now we have to get these framed together. But again, a great memory. And it supports an artist who I love. And now one of my very close friends and I have very similar art, and we can enjoy it together.
I like that. Spread the love of collecting, right? Right. How about Eva and Terry? Do you have any good stories for us?
Well, we have one story. There was this artist, Hal West, and he had this wonderful painting showing trucks driving along a deserted highway in out west. And his son was still alive, Jerry West was still alive. So Terry called him up because we were going to be in Santa Fe, and said, could we meet and see if we could buy the picture? So he said, okay, we'll meet you. Can you come to breakfast at this cafe in Santa Fe? So we went and had breakfast, and he looked us over to see if we were reasonable to buy his father's painting. And after having breakfast with us, he thought we were okay. So he took us out back to his truck, and then he unrolled a piece of canvas, and he said, there's my father's picture. If you like it, pay us so much, we'll get it to you. And Terry said, oh, that's wonderful, I like it. And it was a wonderful picture because it had these trucks, and on one side of the road, there was a sign that said, families that pray together stay together. And then there was a big truck in it. It was full of meat, and it said, hit me easy, I'm full of bologna. And so we went, and he said, and then Jerry, who was the son of Hal West, said, well, why don't you come out and you can see my father's paintings that he did on the wall of the Adobe Ranch. So we went out there and followed him. And then we met his mother, and she was quite virulent anti-Semitic, and it was kind of hard for me to take, but anyway, didn't say anything. Then it turned out that Jerry West was later, I don't know if he was at that time or not, but he married Marydale Rubenstein, who is one of the pictures we have, has one of the pictures in the exhibit. And she's a very famous photographer, I guess. And she's also Jewish. And I thought, oh, poor girl. But anyway, it was an interesting experience, to say the least. But it was a lot. It was a learning experience too, besides. Anyway, that's one of the funny stories. There's a few others.
And Arthur, how about you? Do you have a good story for us? Arthur, I think you're muted. Be right there, hold on.
You're all set. He's all set. A good story for us?
Yeah. When should I start?
Anytime.
A while ago, I was at a gallery in Florida, and I purchased a piece which I still have, and I believe it's at the Fitchburg Museum now, a sculptural piece by Robin Greeby. And I purchased it, but I had all intentions of bringing it back to Massachusetts, which I did. But before I brought it back, I took some of my friends who lived in Florida also, and I took them to see the piece. They said, how could you buy this piece of whatever? And I said, this is a magnificent piece by this well-known artist, Robin Greeby. And they disagreed with my taste. Subsequently, I shipped the piece back to Massachusetts. It's now at Fitchburg, I understand. And I had the same people, and I invited them over just to scan my art collection up here. And they looked at the Robin Greeby piece and they said, that is the most magnificent piece I've ever seen you have. Whereas they chastised me for even buying it. Another story was, a long time ago, there was an exhibit at the Boston Center for the Arts. And at that time, I went in and purchased a piece from the artist was Ridley Howard. And they said, you can't take it now because it was still showing the exhibit. And I said, please tell Ridley Howard to call me. And I just forgot about it. About 3 months later, I get a call on the phone, and a guy in a very gruff voice said to me, this is Ridley, what do you want from me? And I said, who are you? I forgot all about it. He says, this is Ridley Howard, I'm an artist. I said, ah. He says, what do you want? And I said, I'd like to come over and pay you a studio visit. Where are you? He says, I'm in this hellhole in South Boston, on top of a marble distributing factory. There's plenty of dust around here. I said, I'd still like to come over and see you. I went over and I visited for the first time Ridley in South Boston. And I looked around his studio, and after a while he said to me, you made the trek all the way over here. What do you want to do? What do you want to buy from me? And I said to Ridley, I want to buy everything in the studio. He says, he used a very interesting word. And I said to him, I said, you're great. And he said, and I did purchase one other piece at that time, which I've subsequently donated. And I then introduced him to a gallerist in Boston, still there, Howard Yuzerski. and he had several shows with Howard Guzerski because of my introduction. I was very happy to see, and really has become very successful in New York. And those are two stories, but the stories go on and on. That's one of the reasons why I'm so enthusiastic about collecting art and helping others to collect art as well. Whoever's talking right now, I can't hear them.
Unmute.
Almost.
Thank you. Yes, I was going to say that I find that collectors always have great stories and a story about everything, about every work, every piece, every interaction. And I think that's great. So I would like to turn to more of a sort of maybe logistical frame point. I would like to invite audience members to start entering questions into the chat or raise your hand. And I'd like to start off by asking what advice all of you have for younger art collectors or anybody who might be interested in getting started. Arthur, do you want to start?
Sure. One of the advice and pieces of advice that I give almost everybody, whether they're starting out or their experience in the world of art, is that do not limit yourself to what collectors like myself and whoever else is on the panel and many others. Do not limit yourself to what is known as the big names in art. Don't think that you're going to buy an original Moreau, but don't think you're going to buy an original Picasso, etc. But there are so many artists who are extraordinarily qualified and interesting and talented that never make it to the major leagues as far as the world of art. So my first piece about don't limit yourself to what you hear or you see in the museums too. The second thing is that get to know the artist if you can. It's a journey that will be exceptionally rewarding. I alluded to that at the very beginning of this talk. I've learned so much from the artists that I have met. And one more piece of advice is that you don't collect because you want to match the curtains, that you want to get a piece of art that will not be in conflict with part of the decoration. Take a chance. Explore. If you look at the catalog at the Fitchburg Art Museum, you'll understand more of what I just said. Some of the art can be very confrontational. And people have said to me many times, how can you live with that piece of art? It's so confrontational. It's weird. I say, the more you tell me, the more reason why I bought it in the first place. That's why, to me, it stimulates my interest all the time. It doesn't just happen one time, it's every day, including today. And that's what I would advise people who want to become collectors. Other than that, go to Woolworths and buy some prints.
Great, very wise words, Arthur. Thank you. Jennifer, anything to add to that?
Sure. I completely agree with everything you just said. You know, when I was first starting out, I was talking to a lot of collectors and trying to understand the concept of art as investment. And they all steered me away from that. They all said, just buy what you like. The pieces that they had that were the most valuable, they said that they didn't know it was going to be like that for the most part, you know, when they bought them. So it's very hard to predict. So just buy what you like and enjoy it. For people who are starting out, I would say also make sure that you keep records. I did not do so great with that in my first 5 years. I'm better with it now. And also make sure that you insure your art. There are a lot of different ways to do that, but make sure that you insure it, and make sure that you insure the framing that goes along with it. Sometimes the framing can cost more than the piece itself. So you want to make sure that you're insuring both of those things. And also there are a lot of people who rotate their art. And if you're going to do that, you have to think about how to store it safely. And you're going to want to talk to professionals about that. When you run out of wall space is when most people start to rotate their art. But then there are people like me, and Juliet tells me that I'm unusual, but I do like to rotate it because I like to create newness and I like different views of it. And so you want to think about doing that safely and storing it safely and all those pieces, lighting it, all those things.
Great. All very practical things to think about. Fantastic. Eva and Terry, do you have any advice for budding art collectors?
Well, just as the others have said, you really buy what you like. You don't think of it. We never thought of buying a picture as an investment, as far as hoping to sell it for more than we bought it. We just bought things that we liked. That was the main thing, that if we liked it. And sometimes it was expensive and sometimes it wasn't. It was very, but we just basically buy things that you like and that you want to enjoy seeing for a long time. And that's the main thing. And we certainly didn't have any idea that our collection would grow like it did. But it does.
Did you have an extensive collection? Did you grow, maybe this is for both, did you buy like one piece per year kind of thing?
Sometimes we bought one a year, sometimes we didn't buy any a year, sometimes we bought 4 or 5 a year.
Okay.
It just sort of depended, and depended if we were traveling. We always tried to go places. And one time we were in Santa Fe, and we went to this artist cooperative, and we looked at the painting and we just liked it, and we said we like it. And then it turned out that the artist who had painted it was on the desk that day, and she was so excited to sell it to us. And that was just sort of nice because you got to see it, so you just, sometimes it just happens that you buy more than one a year. I mean, we didn't specify this year we have to buy so many paintings or anything like that.
Allie, are there any questions that have come in through the chat that we haven't already covered that you would like to throw out there?
Well,
Yeah. Oh, don't want to cut anyone off. But we did have one question come in over Facebook, just, and some of you talked about this a little bit already, but it's worth maybe reiterating. Where are you going to buy art? Are you going directly to artists typically? Are you going to galleries? Are you going to Boston, to New York? Are you finding people through like a friend of a friend? I mean, there are a lot of ways to do it. How is everyone finding what they want to purchase?
A long time ago, I said that my purchasing career in art is over. Till I was walking on Newbury Street one day in Boston, and I saw a sign on a gallery that said teapot exhibit or exhibits. And I went in there and I was totally fascinated with these non-functional sculptural teapots. It just happened to be the time of that my daughter was graduating from her residency in medicine. I went in there and I was not dressed up at all. And they said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I'd like to be told something about these teapots, sculpture." And the person said, well, look around. I took one of them, which I subsequently purchased that day for my daughter. I went back the next day and I said, this is kind of fascinating. And the next day, I purchased 14 more sculptures from the same gallery. And at that point, I became their favorite son. And yeah. And so the career of collecting has limitless opportunities and boundless areas that we all can explore, because even though we think that we have conquered the art of collecting, we have not even made a dent in that process. It's very, very widespread, and it's more than just New England or the East Coast. It's all over this country, and we're not even talking about Europe. So I feel very fortunate that I've been able to collect some of the pieces and meet many of the artists that I have during my career of collecting. And I swear I'm not buying any more pieces.
I've heard that one before.
At least not today.
Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I've mentioned the Affordable Art Fair, the SMFA art sale, places like ArtsWorcester, visiting exhibitions and museums, definitely galleries. I mean, Arthur said, walk down the street in, Newbury Street. I mean, that might be more expensive for some people, but there are little galleries, poking around everywhere. And then when you travel, whenever I travel, I always try to see, what exhibitions are taking place, wherever I'm going. There's a print fair in Texas that is very popular and a lot of people go to. I think a lot of collectors travel with the purpose of purchasing art. And so they'll go to these fairs and festivals and, look for specific art or want to come away with something, especially if they collect prints. So there are a zillion different ways of doing it. At this point, I'm definitely being introduced to artists by other artists. So that starts to happen. I mean, it starts to snowball. It really does.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Depending on your wall space.
Right. Wall space is always a problem.
All right, so it's 1 o'clock. So Eva and Terry, I'd like to offer you one more chance to contribute any sort of closing thoughts, if you have anything you'd like to add.
Well, just that we've had, it's been a wonderful time collecting art. Like I said, we've just really, really enjoyed it. And we're happy. I was thrilled that the Fitchburg Art Museum wanted to put on a show of our collection. And I think Marjorie did a wonderful job of exhibiting it. I hope you all have a chance to see it. And I don't know, it's been really, really nice. Like I said, we've met a lot of wonderful people. We've had good times. And it's a nice thing to do, to feel like you can help somebody and enjoy it and you get something in return. Right, Terry? Yeah, absolutely. So that's
Great.
that.
Thank you so much. So I would like to bring this to a close. I would like to give a huge thank you to all four of our panelists, Jennifer, Arthur, Eva, and Terry. Thank you. This has been wonderful, very informative. Thank you so much for your time. Yes.
I'd like to add one more thing here.
Go ahead.
It was brought to my attention this morning by Juliet Feibel. She said to me, are you aware that at the Children's Museum in Boston, there's a whole exhibit of non-functional teapots? I said, I'm really not. So she has a picture of the non-functional teapots, and she showed me a picture. And I said, wow, those are my teapots. I donated them to the Children's Hospital through my daughter, who's a doctor.
Oh,
So-
that's great.
And so I'm saying to fellow collectors and others, people who are interested in art,
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
give back, give back.
Mhm.
You're not going to be around forever. Give back so that many people can enjoy the largesse that you have been fortunate enough to share. Give back. You won't regret it. Trust me.
Thank you, Arthur. I think that is a great note to end on. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all who took your lunch hour and 3 minutes to spend this time talking with us. All right, so come to the Fitchburg Art Museum, see our exhibitions, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.